After some bone-numbing temperatures, we actually have a pretty mild day today. It's in the mid-50s, so I'm using the opportunity to clean some tools here. I've put them away kind of dirty, so it's time to clean them up and get them ready to be stored for winter. But I also figured it's early December, it'd be time to show you an end-of-season update on this permaculture food forest after its first year. It was installed in the springtime, and take you on a tour of how far we've come. So it looks pretty barren right now for a food forest, but we've installed basically all the foundation plantings. Now we've got all our trees in, almost all of our trees anyway, almost all of our fruit shrubs, and now we're starting, next year we'll start to interplant amongst these different areas, some annuals and then some additional perennials, I guess that they would call in permaculture a herbaceous layer, and we'll have a lot of this will just be all production all the time. So here is our apricot grouping here. Two different kinds, and off the top of my head I don't recall what they are, but I'll put them on the screen below. We've got one here and one over here. Kind of tough to see with the wood chips as the background on them, but if you recall, I'll see if I can post a picture of it. When I first planted, these things were literally twigs, and they really grew up this year. Obviously they're not going to produce yet, but they're doing quite well, and I'll be pruning them back to start shaping them. And we've got some comfrey where this stick is. That's my marker for where the comfrey was planted. So I've got a couple of areas throughout the garden now where comfrey has been planted, and that'll be a nice addition to it. The beds for the nitrogen fixing probabilities and the dynamic accumulation aspects of it. So this is the where the apricots are. Over here we've got one of our cherry trees. It's lost all of its leaves, so want this to grow up a little bit more. It's getting pretty close to the height that I want it to be. I want it to be about 6 foot tall before I start branching it out. As you might recall, I'm trying to prune all of my fruit trees to a backyard proportion. So I'm going to try and limit them to about 6 feet tall, and then prune them so that they branch out and I'm able to harvest all the fruit from them. This is the other cherry, and this one is about as tall as I want it to get, so I'll be topping it off right about here and then letting it branch out. So I'm assuming any number of these buds here that are on the side will end up branching in the springtime. Now in between the two cherries, this is an apple tree. This is actually a columnar apple, and so it's just going to grow in basically a tall, narrowly defined space right here. I had the apple trees over here in this space here, but they were getting crowded out by the peach trees. So I've moved them out. So we've got the columnar here, and then my other two now are one there and one there, but you can't see that. So I'll show you that later. And then over here, this is a that was my persimmon, and it's had a rough going. It just really wasn't healthy from the time I planted it, even though I got it as a bare root from a nursery, and it was just so far cut. Had to cut it back so far to find green wood on it. I was very disappointed in that tree, and I'm going to end up getting 2 more because persimmons are my favorite fruit. But over here, this is actually a peach, and that was transplanted from in front of the 2 peach trees here. I decided I was crowding it out by having it in front of these 2 trees. As you recall, I do intensive planting. I did intensive planting on the fruit trees, and had I planted them all at the same time, all 3 at the same time, it would have been better. But only doing 2 and then trying to plant in a 3rd tree, it made it difficult for the 3rd one to compete with the other 2. So the peach tree was moved from there about 6 feet, 7 feet away to over here. And then I had a plum, which these 2 are. These are plums. And I had a plum right here, and I've transplanted that over there around our pond. So I have a plum, an apple back there, and then another apple over there. So that's basically my foundation plantings for the fruit trees that I've on. I've got a couple more out front, but they've this is going to be sufficient. As you can see, I've got a rather narrow runway of an area to deal with, to plant in, before it branches out a little bit to the side. So I didn't want it to just look like a straight line of trees necessarily, so I tried to stagger them back and forth across the yard. But the narrow confines of it limits the number of trees that I want to have in here if I want to be growing other plants as well. So they've done, I think they've taken, because it was in the end of November that I transplanted all these, had another nice day like today, and used the opportunity to still have soft ground to move them and transplant them in. And it's actually quite easy to do. So I'm hoping come springtime they'll take root and grow from there. Be doing some pruning on the fruit trees, on the plum and the peach. Despite having done a pretty good summer pruning on these, they still shot up again. So I'm going to be cutting them back a little bit further each time till I get them down a little bit lower, and because that's way too high. I'll never get all the fruit that's up there. So we'll be, as I said, pruning them to a backyard proportions. And then over here is my blackberries. They did quite well this year. Had 2 nice harvests off of them. Made some blackberry pies and some blackberry jam as well. Also, down here, we've got 2 new plantings. These were actually offshoots of these plants. Tipped them into buckets, and they took root. So at the end of the season, I transplanted them in, and next year they should grow up. So they'll grow in between these trellises here, and this should all be a nice blackberry area for years to come. My grapes, they grew fantastic this year, and I'm hoping next year they'll do even better. We've pruned them back to just 2 buds on each node, and we're slowly getting them to go across. So it's actually almost all the way across the lattice work up here. So the Reliance grapes, the red seedless, I think they had a bit of black spot last year. So I tried to treat it, but it was too far gone, I think, at that point. So I'm going to be on it earlier this year, and I'm looking forward to getting some fruit next year. The green grapes, the Niagara grapes, we actually got a nice little harvest off of them. I mean, it was only right in this section here that produced any grapes, because last year it only grew to the top of the pergola, and that was the fruiting canes that we had. And then basically all throughout the year it grew all the way to the back, and then started going across. And then the same thing on this side, that it had only grown up basically to here, and now it's gone all the way down, and it's coming across this way. So they'll end up meeting somewhere in the middle, and we'll and hopefully we'll have some production next year. I think the following year, once this has been all grown in and I'm not allowing it to grow out anymore but trimming it back, I think we'll have some really nice production. We'll also have some nice shade here overhead with the grape leaves, and then just have hopefully we'll be able to sit on the chairs here like Roman emperors and eat grapes hanging from above. Just need some concubines to be waving palm fronds over me. While I'm here, I'll just show you the water collection system, the rainwater collection system. It worked great this year. All 3 barrels filled up and was available when I needed some supplemental watering during some drought periods during the summer. And it was hooked up down here to the pump. It's a 250 gallon, I believe, or 200 gallon per minute pump. Got it from Harbor Freight. So we hook it up to a hose, and I was able to run it out and water the fruit trees and the other plants as needed. It turns out I actually didn't need to water all that much, because all these wood chips, they hold a lot of water. I probably didn't even need to water when I did, but I just felt I needed to use it since I had the the water saved. This is the other fruit tree, the other apple tree I was talking about. This is the one I planted in the springtime. I think it's a Red Delicious. Maybe it's a yellow. No, not yellow. I'm pretty sure it's a Red Delicious. And it was getting crowded out by a shade from the peach trees, so it was moved over to here. And then this is the Golden Delicious over here. And this, I'm hoping, has taken. It doesn't look like it's any worse for the wear for the transplant, but it's around the pond, and I think it'll provide some shade and some cover from possible predators flying overhead for the fish that we have. Let's see if we can see them in here. As you can see, I have netting over it right now, and the only reason I have netting on it right now is to prevent the fall leaves from getting into the water. I had it originally in here too, covered up here, but I just decided to close off this lower pond, which I still have to do, clean out the leaves, empty it out, clean it out, and just going to have the upper pond open. I'll probably just have a little heating element floating in the water there, just to keep it from freezing. I think the fish, they're comets, I think. Comets, rockets, I forget what kind, but they've actually grown pretty big from the tiny little things that we had. But they're doing well, and so just to keep them alive during the winter time. But starting to put in some plantings around the pond, and there's actually a few that have died back now, and they're underneath the leaves and netting here. But so next year we'll be adding more plantings to it, and slowly we'll be building up around the pond. And like I said, we'll have the fruit trees, the plum there, and then the 2 apple trees. My burn barrel, still working on that. The chickens, they're doing great. And Buff Orpington here is my friend. She follows me everywhere I go when I come into the yard, usually the first over. She's pretty friendly too. Will occasionally let me pick her up. She's not. I think she's the only one not laying eggs so far. And the other 3, I've got the barred rock in the coop right now. Is probably getting ready to lay an egg today. The 3 of these, they all lay eggs intermittently. Usually get about 1 to 2 a day. I think I've only had one day so far where I've actually gotten 3 eggs. So still waiting for her to start producing. Maybe in the springtime she'll come around. Otherwise she'll be dinner. And the compost pile. I just added some vegetables that I got from the fruit market this morning, and they've already started sorting it out and spread it all over the place, and so they're enjoying their meals as well. I'm not sure if I had mentioned previously, I do keep a feed bucket in there just so that they do have feed available to them. It is filled with feed right now, and they can reach in and get whenever they want it. Occasionally, usually in the morning, they'll go over there and peck at it and get some, but then they'll come out, and then all day long they're in the compost area spreading out the leaves and picking away at what they want. I have it inside the coop now just for the winter time, just so the snow doesn't pile up against it and get it wet. But no problems there. So the composting system, now what I do is I just have one big pile of wood chips and leaves in here, and usually once a day, at worst once every other day, I'll come in with my pitchfork and I'll pile it up again, particularly when we've had those really frigid days and it's almost frozen solid. Opening it up allows some heat to escape and lets the chickens have some warmth and pick through it a little bit easier. But really haven't had too many of those kind of frigid days so far, but we're still early here, only beginning of December, so I'm sure we'll be getting more soon enough. This tree here is I thought the wild choke cherry, and it never actually produced anything this year. I think it was the first year it didn't produce anything, which is pretty funny. So I have this idea of pollarding the tree, which would be cutting it down, say around this level, and then letting it branch out from here, and having the fruit much more accessible. But that would entail a little bit of tree cutting, which I'll have to see if I can finagle my neighbor to allow me to get on his property so I can get these branches that overhang his yard. But that's a project for next year. And then briefly, the traditional vegetable garden. It didn't turn out bad. Had a couple of failures, a couple of successes. Next year, I think I'm ready to hit the ground running though. And we've already got our garlic planted, and it's, as you can see, it's sprouted up. So next year we'll be harvesting that. And I have a couple of cabbages, winter cabbages planted back there, but I think I might have put them in the ground too late. So I'm just letting them go anyway for now. It doesn't matter. I was just had some plants and I threw them in the ground. But the beds are all prepared. They're covered with the compost that I made in my compost bin and from the chickens. So they've been covered with a good 1 to 2 inches of the compost completely. And I think next year they'll have a great growing medium, and just doing a no-dig method in this garden and just layering right on top the compost. So here we've got some more elderberry. These three right along here are elderberry, and they're from that batch. And then in front, of course, I've got the honeyberry up there. And then I've got my peach trees in that island, and they're protected from the deer, which have a ton of pressure this year. Really chewed the heck out of them a few times. So hopefully the cage around them now will protect them from that. So that's really where we are. As I said, using the opportunity of the nice weather that we have to clean some tools and get them sharpened and put away for the winter. That way they'll be ready to go come springtime. And it's a great opportunity to take a look at the garden and show how we've progressed in this first year of our permaculture food forest, and where we're planning on taking it next year and beyond. So if you like what you see, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you'd already do so, and hit that notification bell, and that way you'll be notified right away when videos like this are posted. Okay, thanks for watching.